I think it's safe to say that anyone who plays Hell Let Loose has been on the receiving end of their fair share of devastating artillery barrages. It's an experience that even the best of players are all too familiar with. But after I teach you the art of artillery, it's you that's going to be raining down death from above. That's right, my friend, the battlefield will be your canvas, and you'll be painting it red with the blood and guts of your stupid, sorry enemies in no time. Let's talk some artillery. The first thing you need to figure out is whether you're going to be running artillery solo or if you have a buddy or two that'll be joining you. If you're running solo, then I recommend joining an existing squad and choosing the engineer role so that you can build some resource nodes before you go messing about with artillery. You see, resource nodes generate, well, resources for your team such as fuel, manpower, and munitions. And each HE or high explosive round that you load into that artillery gun costs your team 3 munitions, while each smoke round costs 5. And these munitions are shared with your commander, who utilizes them for cool shit like calling in bombing runs and precision strikes. So since you're going to be burning up munitions with artillery, it's only right that you build a set of resource nodes to help offset your usage. You're going to want to keep an eye on your munitions balance throughout the game, which can be found right here above the tactical map with the little ammo box next to it. If you're not sure how to build resource nodes, go ahead and check out my engineer guide down in the video description, which will walk you through it along with all kinds of other cool shit you can do as an engineer. Now, if you do have a buddy or two joining you on artillery, then you could just create your own locked infantry squad and have someone go engineer to get the nodes built. As a squad leader, you'll have access to the leadership voice channel, and that'll allow you to speak directly with the other squad leaders as well as your commander, which is essential for properly coordinating artillery strikes. Locking your squad keeps randoms from joining, not realizing you're a dedicated artillery squad and won't be leading them into battle on the front line. And you can also mark your squad as a dedicated artillery squad by using the unit designation feature. This can be done in the deployment menu by selecting the artillery icon next to your squad's name. It lets players know that you're running artillery, and from there they can decide if they want to join you or choose a different squad. Now, each team has 3 big, beautiful artillery guns located at their center HQ, which are also clearly marked on the map. To enter a gun, walk up to it and hold the F key. By default, you'll enter the gunner position, but you can slide back and forth from gunner to loader using the F1 and F2 keys. And if you're running solo, you're going to have to get used to doing just that. In the loader position, you can load a shell into the gun by pressing the R key. Now, you don't have to hold R until the shell is fully loaded. You can actually start to hit F1 to switch back to the gunner position as soon as the little reload progress bar is just about in line with the word loading in red there. It takes a little practice to time it right, but you'll have it nailed down in no time, because let's be honest here, you're a frickin' stud. And studs learn new skills quickly, like how to hit the like button on a YouTube video that's providing useful information to them. Yeah, I know, that was pretty smooth, wasn't it? Now, having a dedicated loader does increase your rate of fire a little bit, since you don't have any wasted time switching between positions. But even if you have a friend or two joining you, I still personally feel it's more beneficial to the team to have multiple guns firing at a slightly slower pace than a single gun firing at a slightly faster pace. Not only does this allow you to hit multiple positions on the map simultaneously, but it can also give you a better chance of survival should an enemy recon unit show up and try to fuck with you. And believe you me, if you're being effective enough with your artillery, the enemy recon squad will come try to fuck with you. You see, recon squad leaders are the only squad leaders who are able to place an outpost further than 2 rows deep into enemy territory, and so it's generally considered to be recon's responsibility to take out the enemy artillery when it becomes a problem for the team. Anyway, if you and your buddy are both on the same artillery gun, all the enemy recon squad has to do is toss a cheeky frag grenade at your feet and you're both as good as pink mist. But if you're on separate artillery guns, chances are one of you is going to start taking fire before the other, and this gives the other person a chance to jump off the artillery gun and attempt to fight back. Now, if you do manage to kill the recon squad, don't just go right back to your business on the artillery guns, because I can guarantee you that they have an outpost nearby and they'll be back before you know it. So once you kill those handsome, charismatic, well-hung recon pricks, you should set out to try to find their outpost ASAP and destroy it. This will force them to redeploy at their nearest garrison, which is most likely much farther away than their outpost was. And if you get killed by recon, don't just redeploy at center HQ, because they're probably going to be there waiting to kill you as soon as you spawn in. Instead, spawn at one of the other HQs and work your way back to the middle HQ on foot. See, by not spawning spawning at center HQ right away, the Recon unit may assume that you've given up on artillery and they might just decide to fuck off.
Yeah, I think they gave up on it. Let's just move on.
But if they do hang around, you should be able to get the jump on them since they don't know which direction you're going to be coming from. And since we're on the subject of dealing with enemy recon, here's a couple more things you can do to help protect yourselves. Before you even get on the artillery guns, place down an outpost somewhere nearby. When enemies get near your outpost, the icon on your map will light up, and that'll tip you off that it's time to throw down. If you've got an engineer in your squad, have them place AP mines and choke points that you think the recon units are going to pass through on the way to your position. And every time they die and redeploy, have them put down more mines. After all, a mine is a terrible thing to waste. You can also try to disrupt the sight lines to your artillery guns by building fortifications like barricades or even parking unused transport trucks next to your artillery guns for some concealment and hard cover. But enough about recon. Artillery really boils down to a few key actions, and we're going to dive into each one, starting with locating enemy positions. Now, there are different ways you can go about this. As a squad leader, you can man the artillery gun yourself and rely on your commander and fellow squad leaders to mark targets for you on the map. And this can work out really well if you have a cooperative and communicative team. But here's the thing, this guide is for your average public match. And if there's one thing we all know about public matches, it's that the level of communication and coordination isn't always perfect. Each squad leader has their own agenda and thought process, and they aren't always going to be focused on marking targets for their random artillery teammate, even if they mean well. So, while relying on your fellow players to mark targets for you can work out fine, I'm going to suggest an alternative strategy that puts more control into your own hands. If you have someone in your squad who knows how to, have them operate the artillery gun while you stay on the front line, spotting and marking targets using your binoculars.
Lots of infantry on ping if you want to start dropping arty there.
Now, of course, you should still communicate with other squad leaders and encourage them to mark enemy positions as well, but since you aren't focused on leading a squad into battle like they are, you can dedicate all of your time and focus on identifying and marking targets for the boys on the guns.
Hey guys, my squad's on arty, so if you see any targets, make sure you mark them on the map for us.
And really, there's no single correct way to play artillery, and whether you go SL and stay back on the gun or head out to the front line, you need to be marking targets, and you'll understand why in a second here. Pay close attention to those recon planes and flares which can reveal enemy positions on your map, and learn to do what I like to call reading the blueberries. When looking at your map, you'll often notice groups of friendly markers all facing the same direction, not really moving. There's a good chance it's because they're in a firefight with the enemy. So by paying attention to where your teammates are facing, you can get a decent idea of where the enemy most likely is. To mark a target on the map, just click where you want to place it and select an appropriate marker from the list of available options, which includes things like enemy infantry, armor, outposts, garrisons, and light vehicles. Now, once you've identified and marked a target on your map, it's time for the next step, which is dialing in your gun. Pull open your map and hover over the mark with your mouse, and you'll see that it shows you exactly how many meters it is from your position, a key piece of information. In the gunner position, you'll notice on the left side of the screen that there's a key which converts distances in meters to what are called mils. And as you can see, for every 100 meter increment, the mil value changes by 24 mils. So if your intended target is 1200 meters away, that converts to 717 mil, as you can see here. But what if your target's more like 1250 meters away? Since the key goes in increments of 100 meters, you're going to need to do a quick calculation to determine the appropriate mil in this case. Now we can see that 1200 meters equates to 717 mil, and 1300 meters equates to 693 mil. So you need to find the midpoint between 717 mil and 693 mil, which would be 705 mil. Now I don't know about you, but I was a C student when it came to math, so doing this type of calculation in my head on the fly gives me a fucking migraine. But worry not, because there's actually Hell Let Loose artillery calculator apps you can download on your phone that will do this calculation for you. I'll put a couple links to these artillery calculators down in the video description below. Now, a quick side note, the mil conversion is slightly different for the British and Soviet artillery guns, so you'll just want to pay attention to that if you play as those factions. So, as you've probably worked out by now, the mil is what determines the angle of the gun and therefore how far your shell will travel. Once you've calculated your mil, you need to adjust your gun accordingly. Down in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, you can see what mil your gun is currently set to, and you can adjust this by using using the W and S keys. Now, once you've got your mill dialed in, you still need to rotate your gun horizontally to align with your target. If you hit the T key to bring up your HUD, you should be able to see your marker in-game. In my case here, it's an observe mark. Now, use the A and D keys to rotate the gun left or right until the crosshair of the scope lines up with the marker. You might notice that you can only turn the gun so far before it stops turning, and in order to align with your marker, you may need to turn the gun further than you're able to. In this case, you can actually switch to the loader position and then continue to use the A and D keys to rotate the base of the gun itself, which allows you to then turn the gun beyond what you're able to do in the gunner position. And with your gun aligned horizontally and your range zeroed in, you're ready to send your first shell. To fire the gun, just click on the left mouse button. It's actually the same button you click when subscribing to Soul Sniper on YouTube. Now hopefully your first shell lands right on target. But something to note here is that the artillery guns aren't perfectly accurate. They do have some dispersion, but with accurate calculations, the shell should land within roughly a 20-meter radius of your target. If you score some kills, you'll hear a hit indicator sound like this. You can also check the scoreboard to see if your kill count is climbing. Once you do start to hit the sweet spot, don't just continue to spam this exact spot over and over again for a sustained period. After the first handful of deadly rounds, enemy infantry is going to start to avoid that area and travel around it. So what you can do is make some small adjustments between each round to spread your impact zone out a bit more and make it less predictable for the enemy. Fire a few rounds, then make a small adjustment. Fire a few more, and then adjust again. After hammering an area for a few minutes, give it a rest and find a new target. That way you'll keep the enemy guessing, and it also does help conserve munitions. Now, the next key concept we're going to cover is communication, and damn, it's an important one. In Hell Let Loose, artillery doesn't give a shit if you're friendly or enemy, so it's absolutely critical that you communicate to your fellow squad leaders when and where you're dropping shells so they can relay that information to their respective squad mates. Trust me guys, being reckless on artillery is one of the very best ways to piss off your entire team and get yourself vote kicked from the servers, so be sure to do your due diligence before you start sending shells, otherwise you could do a lot more harm than good. Once your shells start to hit, ask your fellow squad leaders if your artillery is on point or if it needs some adjusting.
Let us know how those rounds are hitting.
You should also understand that it takes about 25 seconds from the time a round is fired to the time it makes contact. So if you're asked to pull back on artillery, you may still have a round or two up in the air. A lot of people actually don't realize this is the case, so it's a good idea to let your teammates know if you've stopped firing artillery that there may still be a round or two heading their way.
Alright, we're stopping our arty fire on Mason, but just hold off a minute before you push in because there's still probably a couple rounds in the air.
Now I want to talk about armor in vehicles for a sec. While it's technically possible to destroy enemy armor with artillery, it's incredibly difficult and rare. To destroy a tank, you need to score multiple direct hits, and due to the dispersion of your rounds that we talked about, this is very unlikely. You're probably just going to burn through all your munitions attempting it, and you'll likely still fail. Trucks, on the other hand, only require a single hit to destroy them. But then trucks move a lot quicker than tanks, don't they? So trying to score a direct hit on a truck is also pretty difficult and likely just a waste of munitions. Now, somewhat surprisingly, it's actually not possible to destroy a garrison with artillery. However, you can definitely kill the shitloads of infantry that are spawning on it. Just make sure that before you decide to shell an enemy garrison mark, that there aren't any friendlies near it. I can tell you from personal experience that it's so frustrating to be about 3/4 of the way through dismantling an enemy garrison, only to suddenly die from friendly artillery. Catching a huge spawn wave is freaking awesome, but it's not worth team killing a friendly who's seconds away from destroying the garrison itself. So always check for nearby friendlies, and really this rule applies to anywhere you plan to send shells. Now earlier I mentioned there are two types of shells, HE or high explosive, and smoke shells. You can switch between shell types using the 1 and 2 number keys. There's a couple different ways people recommend using smoke shells. You might hear some people talking about firing a handful of HE shells and then ending with a single smoke shell to signal to their teammates that they're done shelling that area and that it's safe to push in. Or you might hear people talk about sending a smoke shell out before sending HE as a warning to nearby friendlies that they're about to shell that location. But here's the thing about that. The very fact that these two strategies completely contradict each other is reason enough for me to not recommend either of them to you. I mean, let's be honest here, guys. Your average blueberry out on the battlefield isn't going to understand either of these strategies, or know which one is being implemented by the artillery team for that matter. They're neat strategies in theory, and they may work very well in an organized, competitive environment, but in your average public match, I just don't think they're realistic. In public matches, I personally feel smoke shells are most useful when dropped on the enemy positions to blind and disorient them while your teammates make a push. An example that would come to mind would be smoking the German side of the bridge on Remagen so you can push across the bridge. They could also be used to try to force enemy tanks to relocate from advantageous positions they've gained by blinding the crew and briefly taking them out of the fight, and making them a bit more vulnerable to rockets and satchel charges. Alright soldier, you're ready to go blow some shit up. And if you're into that sort of thing, you might also be into my ultimate armor guide. In that video, I collaborated with some of the top tankers in my community who have spent thousands of combined hours running armor. It's definitely the best introduction to armor in Hell Let Loose that you're gonna find, so I'll catch you over in that video.